When in practice, do you ever sometimes feel that the anxiety is just eating you alive and you're wondering, how can I control this inner fear that takes control of me? So today we're going to give you a few little tips and tricks that will hopefully help keep your anxiety under control. Anybody who's in business will from time to time encounter situations that gives rise to tremendous anxiety. And that is a normal process, I think, of being in business. And some people, I think, feel it more than others. But I think there are coping mechanisms that come with practice and makes it a little bit easier and better each time to deal with these moments of anxiety while in business. So today I'm going to talk about a few little tricks that I've learned over the years that has worked extremely well for me in coping with those moments of anxiety. And I find just having those tricks in my belt allowed me to control my anxiety even more. So it's as if now I've got confidence that if something comes up, the anxiety won't take control of me. And just knowing that helps keep the anxiety down. So here are a few things that I've learned that I think you'll find very useful. So the first thing we're going to tackle is when you're dealing with a really difficult client, which will cause your anxiety to just pop up very, very quickly without warning and giving you no opportunity to really adjust to it. So let's talk about those extreme quick cases of anxiety where you have no time to really readjust. And an example of that is coming face to face with, for example, with an unhappy client where they're coming into your place of business and just hammering it home. So where do you start? What's the first thing you do? So the first thing that I recommend that you do is just learn to breathe. Long breath. And you'll see every now and then people who are really stressed, they're going to go outside, they're going to take a cigarette, and they're going to say, well, the cigarette helps them relax. Well, anybody who knows anything about nicotine doesn't help you relax. The reason that people will see cigarette as something that helps them relax is because of what's required in you taking a puff. So usually these people will go outside, they're going to take the cigarette, they're going to go, and they're going to let it out. And it's these long breaths that really help bring your anxiety down. Now, that's something that I had learned many years ago, and I found that it helped, but I found that once I understood why it helped even more, because now I learned how to breathe even better. So one of the things that I've learned in studying the mind behavior over the years is that whenever you come across a situation that's extremely high stress, what's going to happen is our animal instinct will kick in. So similarly to someone who's walking through the woods and come across a bear on their path, you're going to have the same kind of reaction that you would with, say, a client confronting you with a problem. In other words, the fear will kick in and suddenly the fight or flight response will kick in. So how that happens, and don't take it from me because I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but this is what my understanding is that what happens is whenever you get these situations that are extremely high stress, such as meeting a bear, or meeting a difficult client, your system is going to get flooded with cortisol. And what cortisol does, amongst other things, is that it'll speed up your respiration, it'll stop your hair from growing, and kind of shut down all the non-essential parts of your body that doesn't need to operate at full bore at the moment, such as your digestive system and more. But the other thing that it'll do is it'll disconnect the neocortex, which my understanding is the part of the brain that allows you to think things through. Now, if you're walking down a path and you meet a bear, to have that happen is a healthy thing, because you don't want to be in a position where you're going to start thinking things through as to, okay, so what are my options here? No, you want to react quickly and you want your mind to be focused on getting the heck out of there or giving that bear your best possible fight. So it is a response to fear, a response to keep you safe. But in an office environment, it kind of works against us. So how do you combat that? Well, what happens is when you take this large breath, the subconscious mind, my understanding is doesn't know the difference between fear and what's going on. So when you take this large breath, you're fooling the mind into thinking we're safe again. There's no danger here. We're all good. And so the mind's saying, well, if he's taking all these big breaths, then clearly there can't be any dangers here because the body wouldn't be reacting this way. This is something that happens after we've escaped from the bear. So having those big breaths, I find, makes a huge difference. And once I understand the impact it has on the body, and you take a few of these deep breaths, you're going to feel a tremendous, a quick response to your cortisol level and to your anxiety and your fear. So the beauty of doing that is that it will allow you to now connect again with your neocortex and allow your brain to start thinking again. So that's what you want. You need to be in a position where you can start thinking again and not be in a fight or flight mode of operating. Once you've regained a little bit of control, one of the things that I recommend that you always remind yourself is that the likelihood that that person who's really giving you a hard time is probably not your reason for success. So in other words, you got to keep reminding yourself, well, if I lose this client, it's not the end of the world. My practice will probably continue to survive and continue to thrive, and it's not losing one client that's going to be the detriment of your whole practice, as we sometimes have ourselves believe. And you got to remember the mind loves drama, so it's always kind of natural for us to kind of think, well, if I don't resolve this quickly, that the client's going to do all kinds of damage. Well, the damage may not be quite as big as you think it is. And I remember more than one occasion where I had a client being really upset with me, and my instinct was to really react and be extremely fearful of not only losing this client, but losing a whole slew of clients because of what that person might be saying. The fact of the matter is, I've discovered over the years that it doesn't happen that way. I can't remember in all the years I've been in practice, remember losing a client because of another client being upset with me. Now, I may have lost some referrals because of that. I have no way of knowing that. But I don't remember a single time having a client being really upset with me, leaving the office upset, and still losing other clients because this particular client was upset with me. So the possibility of this causing a chain reaction, I say, is extremely slim, far more slim than we will lead ourselves to believe. So all this to say, it's not that you should just let the client go on his merry way angry. You want to have this thing resolved as much as possible. And what I just talked about is just a tool to bring your mind under control so that you can start thinking straight again. Another great strategy to diffuse a situation is to simply listen. And I've found that if a client comes in really, really upset, one of the strategies that works extremely well is to just listen with a sympathetic ear. Just let them vent, let them talk, and agree with what they're saying for the moment. Even if they're wrong, be sympathetic and listen actively. And then after a while, once they've kind of let it all out, you're going to see that they're going to kind of calm down because they've just said everything they want. And if you don't confront them, because the worst thing you can do is to start confronting them again what they're saying, and it'll just bring up and elevate their anger. So let them diffuse, let them talk, and just listen. And then the next strategy, once I've had a chance to listen, have them diffuse and think things through, what I usually want is to have them out of the office as fast as I can so I can regain better control of my thoughts. Because odds are good, if I've been screamed at for the last 5-10 minutes, my mind is probably not operating on all its senses properly, and I will probably not come up with the right things to say and the best possible strategy to deal with this. So what I usually recommend is whenever I have a very upset client, I'll let them diffuse, bring their anger down, and then says, okay, I appreciate what you've said. I want to just be given a little bit of time to think about what you've said so I can think about a way to resolve this that's going to be acceptable to you and that you're going to be happy with us again. So by doing so, what you're kind of saying to him is, odds are good that he's going to leave a lot less angry than when he came in, and he's going to be, as long as you get back to him fairly quickly, he'll be okay with that. Now, the beauty is that once he's left the office, now you can really work on bringing your whole heart rate down and everything down so you can start thinking again. And only then would I start processing alternatives, ideas, possibilities of how to resolve the problem. So one thing I want to try and do is to make a decision why my emotions are heightened, and do it rather once I'm calmer. Now, once the client has left, now comes the different strategies. Well, first of all, more breathing, allow yourself time to calm yourself down, and not a bad idea to postpone making any kind of decisions until even the following day, to leave yourself time to sleep on it and really bring your whole heart rate down completely before you make any decisions. Because odds are good that at that point, you're still possibly a little bit upset about the things that he or she would have said, and you might not still be thinking too clearly. Another strategy that I found really worked is to talk to people. So whenever I was in those situations and I wasn't totally sure whether my mind was operating on all cylinders, it's just to talk to people that I trust and kind of put the whole situation out. Here's what happened. Here's what he or she said. Here's how I'm feeling. Here's what I think I should do. But I need someone, a sounding board, let's just say, to run this by. Because that person whom you're going to be talking to, odds are good, especially if they weren't even in the room and they've got no dog in the fight, their thinking should be crystal clear as to the possibilities and ways of doing. And especially if you're talking to someone who has experience in dealing with that, you will likely have a really good person and a good sounding board to provide you with alternatives of way to respond to the problem that you just had. So to finish the thought as it relates to that angry client that just finally left your office, possibly a little bit deflated, you want to definitely come back to that client. And you may say to yourself, well, I don't want him back in my office anyways. I don't want him as a customer. But what you want to do is at least diffuse it to a point where he or she will not go out and put a bad review on Google or talk to too many people. So I'm usually very big on doing whatever damage control that I need to make so that they may not be content enough to come back, especially if I don't want them to come back, but at least content enough to not want to go out on every rooftop and talk against you or your practice. So if you can diffuse it to that point where they're kind of satisfied and no longer angry, I think you've done your job in diffusing that situation. So before we go through the little tips and tricks about how to deal with anxiety in general, I would really appreciate if you could like this video, share some comments, subscribe to it. And again, with regards to anxiety, like I said, I think we all have different ways of dealing with it. I would really appreciate you guys putting comments below your thoughts about how you deal with anxiety, so whoever listens to this video will also have the insight of other people and what tools they use to control their anxiety and get a better life. So going back now to dealing with anxiety, something that I think is really important when you're in business or in a practice of any kind is that you got to recognize that dealing with a certain amount of anxiety is a normal process. And so to believe that nobody else is suffering or going through or thinking the way you are, I don't think is terribly true. There's very few people that I know that I've ever met who were able to run a good business and not feel, I'd even say, tremendous anxiety from time to time. That's part of being in business, and it's just the nature of the beast. So one of the things I strongly recommend is that you continue to learn. So I provide you with a few coping mechanisms here that really work well for me, that I think and hope it'll work for you. But don't be afraid of going on site and for example, the websites, YouTube, because there's tons of information out there on how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with stress, and be mindful about learning all of those skills that you need on how to deal with stress and anxiety. And the other thing that I strongly recommend is don't be afraid of finding yourself a therapist. So if anxiety is something that is constantly part of your life, find yourself a good therapist, because that person can also provide you with tremendous tools that's really tailored to you on how to deal with your anxiety. And the other thing that I find to me that was really helpful was my mentor. It was always nice to have someone that I could call anytime that I knew would understand what I was going through and would allow me to flush out all of those things that were eating at me on a business perspective. Because I found that a therapist is phenomenal at really dealing with those interior feelings that you're having to deal with. But it's kind of nice to be able to talk to someone who's also in business or who has been in business and talk about your anxiety at that level. And I found that to always be extremely healthy for me on how to live a healthier and happier business life. Well, that's about it. I hope that you found this video useful. I suggest that you work on your practice rather than in your practice and make every minute of every day count.